Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Likon Onobanjo. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin the news in America, where United States Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump has solidified his hold on his party's electorate after his New Hampshire primary win against Nikki Haley, his only other major Republican rival left in the race. In New Hampshire, Trump received 54.6% of the vote, while Haley received 43.2%. 20 of the state's 22 delegates to the Republican National Convention had been assigned by late on Tuesday in the northeastern U.S. state, with 8 going to Haley and 11 going to Trump. In the meantime, Republican presidential hopeful Nikki Haley has vowed to press on with her campaign in the wake of a second consecutive loss to Donald Trump. Haley toured much of New Hampshire ahead of Tuesday's primary, courting both independent and moderate Republican voters, but she was unable to catch Trump, who had a comfortable 11-point lead with most ballots counted. He now appears set to clinch the Republican nomination. The former president last week won the landslide in Iowa's caucuses, with Haley placing third behind Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Days later, Haley became the last remaining rival to Trump after DeSantis quit the race. Joining us now to give more insight to this is News Central's international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia Hagen, it's nice to have you around once again to discuss this. We can't hear you. You might need to unmute your device. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
All right, fantastic. So tell us, what happened last night at the New Hampshire primary?
Well, the New Hampshire primary was one of the last primaries before the Republican candidate is picked. And what happened was Donald Trump getting basically all of the votes, absolutely trouncing Nikki Haley. Now, we had Ron DeSantis last week saying that he was out of the running, and pretty much leaving it down to these two candidates, Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. And so basically, Donald Trump won the presidential primary with just 90% of the votes in earlier on today. He had a 12-point lead over the former South Carolina governor, Nikki Haley. People are very much accepting now that Donald Trump will be the candidate for the presidential nomination for the Republicans. He took to social media overnight. He has referred to Nikki Haley as a bird brain in the past. He said, very bad night for Nikki, bird brain Haley, not as bad as last week in Iowa, where she came a distant third. He said, next week in the Nevada caucus, she didn't want to play because of her bad polling. And he said, can somebody please explain to Nikki Haley that she lost and lost really, really bad? So Nikki Haley really not doing well in the caucuses. And it does look like we are going to have Donald Trump as the candidate for the Republican presidential nomination.
Well, despite Nikki Haley not hitting the numbers that are needed for her to stand a chance, she has said that she's going to continue with a campaign. But then let's put it this way. What does it mean for you looking at resilience to continue to push on? And does she even have a chance? Did she actually stand a chance to compete with Donald Trump in the first place?
At this point, to be honest, no. We have to accept that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee for the Republican presidential party. Lots of things went wrong for Nikki Haley last night. Look, it just basically wasn't her night. She has so many resources. She was in a place to do very, very well. But in the independent vote, which is about 40% of the electorate, they just didn't go for her. The undeclared just are not going for her. They are turning to someone they know, and the someone they know is Donald Trump. She is just not going to be able to convince the GOP faithful that she is the Republican candidate that they should pick. Donald Trump has that all but sewn up. She may have the resilience to continue, but what she doesn't have is the numbers.
So why is the world watching these U.S. elections so closely?
Look, there isn't really a country in the world that doesn't have some sort of investment in the US election. It isn't going to be affected by who is president. We're at a time where the US is involved in two hot wars, so to speak, in Ukraine and, of course, the Israel-Gaza conflict. And whoever gets into office will probably be more cold towards the Ukraine. You know, Donald Trump has said that he could end that war in 24 hours. Russia will love that. Maybe the Ukraine not so much, because it may not go their way. And across Central America as well, you do have elections, as well as people still trying to cross the border into the US. Whoever is the president may take a different line on immigration policies. So there was a lot of people invested the world over, and this is a bumper year for elections. About 2 billion people worldwide have the chance to vote in an election this year, but none so hotly contended, maybe apart from the UK election, as the US election. And if, Trump decides to remove America from NATO, so to speak, that will be crippling for NATO. So the thought of having Donald Trump again as president could be a real deal breaker for a lot of people, and a real deal breaker for a lot of the situations that have US involvement, whether it comes to Cold Wars, hot wars, immigration. There's not a lot of people who aren't invested. Everyone is invested in this election.
Afia, again, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Now, moving on, British billionaire Joe Lewis has pleaded guilty to U.S. insider trading charges on Wednesday and apologized to a judge for his conduct. 86-year-old Lewis pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud and 2 counts of securities fraud as part of an agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. His lawyer, David Zono, says as part of the plea deal, Lewis has the right to appeal in the event he's sentenced to prison time. According to prosecutors, Lewis, whose family trust controls the majority of Tottenham Hotspur, was charged in July last year with passing inside information on his portfolio companies to 2 of his private pilots, as well as friends, personal assistants, and romantic partners, enabling them to reap millions of dollars of profits. And now to South America. Following the countrywide strike, flights at Yoye Newbury airports in Buenos Aires have been cancelled, leaving passengers and tourists struck there. The Argentine president, Javier Milei, on Wednesday faced the first general strike in just 45 days of government against his draconian fiscal adjustments and his plan to reform more than 1,000 laws and regulations that governed for decades. The general strike is called by the largest trade union center in Argentina, the General Confederation of Labor, with a Peronist orientation and the support of the Confederation of Argentine Workers, the second largest, which they hope to bring together tens of thousands of protesters.
Como verán, me desayuné con esto, que no hay vuelos. Supuestamente los vuelos hasta el mediodía iban a funcionar, después de las 12 cortaban. Pero no, adelantaron al paro, no sé qué pasó. De hecho, las empresas, si ves por las ventanillas, las empresas que son extranjeras, hay personal y aerolíneas argentinas, está todo vacío. La verdad es una vergüenza. Y la verdad que bastante enojado, porque uno planea las vacaciones, reserva un hotel, todo. Yo ya perdí plata en venir hasta acá, la noche de hoy, porque hoy yo ya no voy a poder volar, voy a tener que mañana, ya perdí una noche del hotel. No sé si te lo devolverán, eso, la verdad es una vergüenza.
In Europe, as war rages in Ukraine, the Nordic nations' new leaders' trickiest challenges are likely to regard Russia. Finland, Europe's easternmost liberal democracy and a new NATO member, is bracing for an important presidential election. The Nordic nation controls the European Union's longest border with Russia and is one of a handful of EU members to have fought a war with Russia. Its position on Ukraine has been outspokenly and consistently against Russia's invasion, and it has been a leading provider of armaments and training to the Ukrainian military. In the meantime, at least 18 people have been killed and more than 130 injured after Russia hit Ukraine's biggest cities with waves of missiles. Speaking in a somber evening address, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia had launched some 40 missiles of varying types. More than 200 sites were hit, including 139 homes, with many deaths in an ordinary high-rise apartment building, Zelensky said. Ordinary people live there, and he promised a strong response. The relentless Russian bombardment has kept Ukrainians on edge, while the 1,500-kilometer front line, where soldiers are engaged in trench and artillery warfare, and has barely moved.
30 людей поранені або травмовані. Усім їм надається необхідна допомога. На жаль, 18 людей загинули. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. І це число загиблих може зрости. Зокрема, у Харкові досі триває рятувальна операція, розбирають завали будинку. Звичайна багатоповерхівка, звичайні люди.
Let's also tell you that Russia on Wednesday accused Ukraine of shooting down a military transport plane carrying dozens of Ukrainian prisoners, killing everyone on board. The Defense Ministry said the crash had come just hours ahead of an agreed prisoner exchange later on Wednesday that was set to take place at a border crossing in Belgorod. It claimed Ukrainian forces stationed in the Kharkiv border region had fired 2 missiles at the transport aircraft and described the incident as a terrorist act. A Ukrainian government body responsible for issues linked to prisoners of war said it was probing the Russian claims.
На борту самолета находилось 6 членов экипажа, 65 украинских военнослужащих для обмена и 3 сопровождающих их российских военнослужащих. Экипаж и все пассажиры самолета погибли. Поражение самолета осуществлено вооруженными силами Украины из района населенного пункта Липцы Харьковской области с применением зенитно-ракетного комплекса. Радиолокационными средствами ВКС России наблюдался пуск 2 украинских ракет. Украинское руководство прекрасно знало, что по сложившейся практике сегодня будет осуществлена перевозка военно-транспортным самолетом на аэродром Белгород украинских военнослужащих для обмена. По достигнутой ранее договоренности данное мероприятие должно было состояться во второй половине дня в пункте пропуска Колотиловка на российско-украинской границе. И тем не менее нацистский киевский режим пошел на данный шаг, преследуя цель обвинить Россию в уничтожении украинских военных.
French government spokesperson Prisca Thévenot says blockades are taking place and there is no intention of putting a stop to this expression of protest. Thévenot spoke after the weekly cabinet meeting about French farmers' protest before answering other questions on the nomination of the remaining cabinet positions, as well as the controversy surrounding the Stanislas private school and the current education minister.
Eu un non-respect de Parcoursup sur l'établissement que vous avez cité. Mais si ça a été écrit récemment dans Mediapart, et c'est très bien, ça a été travaillé dès la mise en place de ce rapport en août dernier. Et, je peux le dire d'autant plus, par Gabriel Attal, qui était au ministère de l'Éducation nationale à ce moment-là, et j'étais sa secrétaire d'État. Les blocages ont lieu, et il n'est pas question effectivement de venir empêcher cette expression de revendication qui se passe, encore une fois, au-delà du drame que nous avons vécu tous ensemble hier, qui se passe bien, dans des conditions de sécurité respectées, parce que les manifestations sont organisées dans un cadre légal. Et pourquoi je peux arriver sur votre petite question, j'ai envie de vous dire qu'il n'y a plus une grande attente et que ça ne va pas tarder puisque ça a été annoncé, ça a été relayé, ça arrivera à la suite du discours de politique générale du Premier ministre la semaine prochaine.
You're watching Beyond the Continent on News Central Television. We're going on a short break now. We'll be back with more stories. Don't go away. We now take you to the Middle East, where the U.S. says its forces have carried out strikes in Iraq on 3 facilities used by Iran-backed militia. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the proportionate strikes targeted Kataib Hezbollah militia group and other Iran-affiliated groups. He said the precision strikes were in direct response to attacks against U.S. and coalition allies in Iraq and Syria. A senior Iraqi official said they were a flagrant violation of Iraq's sovereignty. Iraq's National Security Advisor Qasim al-Araji added that the U.S. strikes did not help bring calm. Writing on X, formerly known as Twitter, he said that the U.S. should pile on pressure for a halt to the Israeli offensive in Gaza rather than targeting and bombing the bases of an Iraqi national body. We also tell you that Pakistan and Afghanistan reopened a key trade crossing on Tuesday, officials on both sides said, after a row over travel papers as Islamabad cracks down on cross-border movements. The Torham border closure since January 12 came after Islamabad imposed tighter controls requiring drivers from both sides to have visas and passport documents many Afghans do not have. Ties between the two countries have increasingly frayed in recent months, with Islamabad accusing the Taliban government of failing to root out militants staging attacks in Pakistan from their soil. Pakistan officials said tighter restrictions on trade and on-off border closures are a pressure tactic to get the Taliban government to work with Pakistan on security. Now, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi flew to Turkey on Wednesday for twice delayed talks that is aimed at ironing out past differences between the two neighbors and trying to halt the spread of the Israel-Hamas war. Raisi's visit to Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan comes with the war in Gaza starting to inflame tensions and escalating fightings across the Middle East. In the meantime, the United States and Britain have stepped up joint airstrikes against Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen in response to their attacks on Red Sea shipping lanes. We now head to Asia, where at least 39 people have been killed and 9 injured in the fire that started in the basement of a shop in the Chinese city of Xinhu. State media said the fire started on Wednesday afternoon local time in the city of Shanxi province. Footage from state-backed Global Times showed smoke billowing from buildings and people jumping from windows. President Xi Jinping has called for an investigation into the blaze. He also demanded the resolute containment of similar deadly incidents in the country. This comes days after 13 children died when the fire broke out in a school dormitory in the central Henan province. Now, 6 people have also died and over a dozen injured in Mongolia's capital on Wednesday after a truck carrying gas collided with a car, causing a huge explosion that sent flames soaring into the night sky. The incident took place in the early morning hours in Ulaanbaatar's eastern Bayanzurk district and involved a truck carrying 60 tons of liquefied natural gas, the Mongolian National Emergency Management Agency said. According to preliminary reports, the Mongolian National Emergency Management Agency says 3 people died in the fire and 3 firefighters were also killed. 14 people were injured, with 10 taken for treatment for burns, while 1 child was being treated for poisoning and 3 other infants were being cared for.
Газтай ч газгүй ч том дэрүүдийг ер нь дандаа хотын цахаар явуулж явах хэрэгтэй байхгүй. Тэгээ ер нь энэ бас нэг төлөвлөлтөө бас нэг дахин бодож үзээд том дэрүүдийг ер нь дандаа л хотын цахаар л явуулж идэг боломоор байна.
Away from that, we tell you that Thailand's Constitutional Court has on Wednesday cleared Prime Ministerial candidate Pita Limjaroenrat of violating election law in a case that could have seen him banned from politics, reinstating him as a member of parliament. The 43-year-old led the Progressive Move Forward party to win the most votes in last year's general election, but was blocked from becoming prime minister after he was suspended as a lawmaker in July. His party was excluded from the governing coalition after the powerful establishment was spooked by the MFP's calls to reform the kingdom's strict royal insult laws, the military and business monopolies.
you want to go back to Parliament?
As soon as possible with this process. So we are asking the Parliament when I'm allowed to be back in. So there's a discrepancy between two organizations, which is the Constitutional Court and the Parliament. And whenever I'm allowed in, I'll be there.
Does this verdict...
I feel all right. I feel regular, like any other working day. In my mind right now is about the next steps of the kind of work that...
Finally on the news, North Korea has fired several cruise missiles from its west coast into the sea, according to South Korea. Seoul's Joint Chiefs said the military detected several cruise missiles launched by North Korea towards the Yellow Sea at around 7 a.m. today. The detailed specifications are being closely analyzed by South Korean and U.S. intelligence authorities. Pyongyang, which is under strict United Nations sanctions over its nuclear weapons program, has continued to conduct weapons tests this year, including a solid-fueled hypersonic ballistic missile and the test of a purported nuclear-capable underwater attack drone. And that's all at this hour. Don't forget to send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number and email on your screen. You can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Nikki Haley.